Ping pong is enjoyed by tens of millions of people around the world, but I'll bet you didn't know that it offers surprisingly relevant lessons for those seeking to enhance their business leadership skills. Now, let's have ourselves a pocket sized pep talk because today's guest, who happens to be an accomplished ping pong player, recognized that the core principles he learned while training to compete at the ping pong table could also be applied to achieving success in business and leadership. Curious? You should be, because I know I am.
A Pocket Sized Pep Talk, the podcast that can help energize your business and your life with a quick, inspiring message. Now, here's your host, Rob Jolles.
Today's guest, Justin Bookie, is an award-winning marketing strategist, former lawyer, and competitive table tennis player who has won medals at the U.S. Open and the U.S. National Championships. He's collaborated with leaders at prominent companies like Disney, Sony, and Honda. He also founded Pong Fit, a nonprofit promoting fitness and community through ping pong. His new book is Ping Pong Leadership, 18 Principles to Succeed at Any Table in Business, Sport, and Life. And we're going to get into it. So happy to have you with us and welcome to the show.
Thanks, Rob. It's great to be here.
Good to have you here. Yeah, I caught a look at your publicist throwing you out there, and I went, I got to talk to this guy. So I'm trying to figure out how you connected ping pong and business leadership skills. Did a ping pong ball hit you in the head? I mean, when did you have this epiphany?
I'm sure I've had a lot of ping pong balls hit me in the head. That is absolutely correct. But it's one of those things where I don't even know if I chose it rather than it choosing me, because I started this game when I was 6 years old. I could barely see over the table. I just took to it instantly, and I kept with it through schooling and jobs and everything. And all the while, people would always come up to me and ask me questions about table tennis or ping pong. And as I learned a lot about challenges in life, in intense competition and then intense business challenges and leadership challenges, I just realized I was applying, without even thinking about it, I was applying my reflexive instincts at the table to these reflexive instinctual responses at the workplace and in leadership situations. And so I realized I've been doing this all along.
Right.
And finally, about, 10 years ago, I thought I should start really trying to crystallize these. And I finally did once the pandemic came along, because I had a little more time to reflect.
You had a little time to do some writing and kind of put it all together.
Yeah.
It's funny you say that it found you. If you listen to my podcast, and we got about 400 at this point, I would say in 200 of them, I'll ask an author, don't tell me how you found this book. Tell me how it found you. Because rarely do we just actually go, there's a moment, there's something that kind of makes that connection. So it's interesting that you found that connection, or it found you, and it just sort of takes on a life of its own. Welcome to the party. I don't think I've ever written a book myself where I just went, I don't know. I was, having a beer and I thought, what the hey? There's more to it than that. People don't understand, but it's usually right there in front of you. And it's just a matter of whether you're going to see it or not.
Sure. And there have been several little inflection points throughout my life, or big ones. I mean, the one I always remember pretty vividly that really started the ball bouncing, is I was at work and we're going into a pretty high stakes presentation with some prospective partners. And I was with a colleague. We're walking down the hall, approaching the nice frosted glass doors. It's 3-4 feet from it. I stopped, did my stance, my success, quick breathe in, breathe out, that I just instinctively do before a table tennis match as I'm about to walk out there, just shake out that last little bit of jittery muscle tension, right?
Right.
And my my work buddy just kind of pauses, looks at me like, what was that? And I go, oh, don't worry about it. It's all good. And I didn't even realize I really did it because it was so natural for me. And that was a really kind of like, okay, there's a signpost right there that there's no difference between stress relief and bracing yourself for battle that happens at the table tennis table or in the breakout room or the boardroom, whatever. right?
Yeah.
That was one of those moments.
Yeah, it's funny when you say that. I'm thinking frequently, and somebody called me on it because I didn't know I was doing it. But frequently, when I'm doing a keynote, and we usually in the back of the room, and they'll call us forward or something, uh, I am rocking a little bit and stretching my hamstrings because I used to be a distance runner. And when we'd line up, and you still had a couple minutes, you just sort of went through this routine. And but it loosened me up and it made me say I'm ready for this race. And until you said that, I've never really connected it before. I just thought, I don't know, it's kind of the way I do it, but it's 100% me getting ready to run a race.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, we haven't evolved. And this, I don't know if we want to get ahead of ourselves, but that's Pong principle number 8. Don't try to conquer fear, use it. Meaning it's a valuable tool. And we haven't evolved really to the point where our brains can distinguish between a saber-toothed tiger breathing down our neck and a quarterly report that we need to give in front of all the C-level suite at our office, because it's this fight or flight hormone that rushes through our body. And so we can't ever just extinguish that from our brains and our hormonal system, but we can tap into it. And then, of course, once we can realize it intellectually, we can kind of channel it to our favor.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you're talking about adrenaline. It's not like adrenaline was invented in 1941. I mean,
Right.
been around. It's funny. And I'm curious about this for you as a speaker. I can have a sore knee. I can have, maybe I'm not feeling 100%. There can be some physical issues going on. I mean, do it long enough and it's just the way it is. I'm assuming, different times when you played, you weren't necessarily at 100% physical level, but I can't remember a time actually when it was game time where I actually felt my knee or my elbow or whatever it is. Afterwards, I'd sit down and 20 minutes later, I go, oh. But that adrenaline just kind of masks and kind of soothes it or something.
Oh, for sure. It's that powerful numbness and the
Right.
endorphins ready for battle, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So you jumped in. He's got, get ready for this. He's got 18 Pong principles. I have forbid him from going over all of them, not because I don't think you can do it, by the way, but because I want people to buy your book. And so we're going to cherry pick a little bit. All right. He brought out principle number 8. Give me another one.
All right. Well, what are you in the mood for? I saw that in your background, you were an auctioneer. Is that right?
I moonlight as a live auctioneer for charities. You were right, sir.
That's amazing. Okay. So you must have so many really fascinating tales of different circumstances, different audiences, different foibles, right?
Well, I'm laughing over here. I have way too many, but yes. Yeah, you got me.
That's correct, maybe. So in that case, I'm thinking Pong principle number 6 might be a good one. What's your ready position? Because that is all about looking at the fact that every day in our lives and every year and every decade, we have to be ready. Whether we know it or not, whether we like it or not, you have to be ready to wash the dishes and put them in the dishwasher properly, or you have to be ready to at least be minimally awake, hopefully to drive your car to work if you're going to do that. Ready to present, ready to talk, ready to write. Okay. And sometimes it needs split-second decision making. Sometimes it's like a long-term thought. And so there's so many ways you had to be ready to give those grand, high-impact auctioneering presentations.
Mm-hmm.
And you probably had to psych yourself up. You had to get focused. You had to realize you were about to give a lot of value, but also generate a lot of value the other way, right? So you had all sorts of prep you had to do. And then, of course, prep in terms of knowing the material and just getting to know the whole situation you're about to present it, right? In table tennis, because every chapter, by the way, has two parts. It's in the game and in leadership.
Ooh, love
So
that.
it's like, here's the principle in the game. So in the game, ready position is, okay, I got my paddle more or less in the middle of my frame of vision, so I
Oh,
can
he's
easily quickly
showing
go.
a paddle right now, everybody. He's showing a paddle. The paddle has made it to
Okay.
the podcast. Keep going. Looks good.
Great radio, great
Great
podcast.
visual. Yeah.
So yeah, you hold the paddle like right kind of in the middle, up towards your chin, nose area, kind of in the middle of your face. So you can quickly go forehand or backhand, depending where the serve's coming, right? And then your knees are bent, you're on the balls of your feet, leaning forward, both elbows up, wide stance, your balance, okay? As soon as you take a swing, you're not done. The swing, part of the swing is the recoil and the reset after the swing. So in the next quarter second, you're ready for the next one, okay? In business and leadership, you have to be ready for these split-second decisions, whether it's an emergency that happens, a call that happens from an unexpected client, partner, associate. But you also have to be ready for really long-term goals and strategies. Like, okay, if you don't have the 5-year outlook, then the 5-month plan is not going to necessarily lead you in the right direction, even though it looks good right now. And so there's so many ways to make sure that you are ready short-term and long-term. And it's not about the beauty of it is you don't have to see the future. You never need the crystal ball because it's all about probabilities. And this studying the past, yes. And then just like at the table, you are maximizing the angles and the geometry in your favor. So as my coach would say, she's an Olympian, former number 5 in China, national champion here. Make the table bigger. Meaning, if you just approach the table 10 degrees to your right, if you're a right-handed person, swivel 10 degrees to the right when you're about to hit a forehand. So you're a little angled from the table, say 45 degrees, right? So you're not just facing it square on. You've kind of enlarged the table because that way you can easily hit the ball down the line or go cross court at the very last moment and your opponent can't tell which way you're going to go. But if you approach the table, which is maybe a more or a less experienced way to approach the table or a problem, you rush in, shoulders squared, ready to go, let's attack, let's do this. You've actually limited yourself greatly. You've shrunken the table because then just physiologically, it's really hard to shoot that forehand down the line parallel. It has to go cross court, or even worse, it'll go off the table, won't even hit because you weren't in a good ready position.
Right.
Okay. So your ready position basically maximizes probability for anything coming your way.
Wow.
If that makes sense.
No, it makes a lot of sense. It's making me think a little bit in terms of, okay, how do I translate that into not just auctioneering is a little side hustle. It's funny. The ready position for me is I can talk for a few minutes, but the moment I grab the gavel, the audience knows they're conditioned. We're moving into ready position because now here comes the chant. Here comes the numbers. It's go time. You have to sell it before you just grab a gavel. But there is almost a physiological change that I go through, and the audience is going through it too. I mean, that you can feel them straighten up in their chair, particularly the ones that are ready to look around and put that paddle, different kind of paddle, but put their paddle in the air. So it's interesting. I'm trying to think as a speaker what our ready position is.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And so to put it in practical terms, if you're a graphic designer right now, your ready position career-wise would be certainly appreciating and diving deeper into AI tools, which are going to hopefully be a tool and a boost for your skill set rather than something your fear will replace you.
Right.
Same with law and marketing and a lot of creative pursuits. I mean, it's going to touch all of us at some point across the board.
How about we've got a bunch of salespeople that like to listen and some entrepreneurs that are listening, but let's focus on the salespeople for a minute,
Sure.
Which, by the way, are entrepreneurs. I don't know how to break it to them, but they're basically running their own territory. They succeed or fail based on their own wits. But how would you translate a ready position to just a typical salesperson, let's say in their car, driving up. We've done some pre-call planning,
Mhm.
but I'm getting ready to walk into that client's office.
Yeah, well, there's certainly the psychological ready
Mhm.
position that's on your end.
Right.
So that's about, do you need to get up more? Do you need to pump yourself up more? Because you're feeling maybe not confident, a little some trepidation, or do you need to calm yourself down? Like, oh man, your pulse is racing. So you need to realize where you operate in your optimal power zone in sales, in any sales situation. So you got to keep a catalog of your past situations, your successes, your failures, your so-so performances. Keep a catalog. Where was I walking through that door? What was my adrenaline meter at?
Right.
Was it a 8? And then I nailed it because I was high, I was on. Or was it a 4? I was so relaxed and I nailed it. So you need your mantras, you need your psych up lines or your music. Always have that ready, either inside your head or
Mhm.
your car, to get yourself in that psychographic zone. So that's
Right.
kind of the
Right. So,
project.
and I actually think that salespeople traditionally undervalue preparation. It's sometimes when there's just a lot of clients to see, we just sort of roll down and keep hitting the cubicles.
Yeah.
And yet we're foolish not to at least spend some time and figure out, as I would think you would do. Okay, you know where to stand on how to hold the paddle and and you've trained well, but would it be of value to you to try and do a little work on that opponent? What are the tendencies of that opponent? Did you have
Yeah.
film study or did you prep for an opponent?
Oh, absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, as much as possible, if I'm in a
Uh-huh.
tournament, I will watch them as much as I can.
Hmm.
But there's traps in that too, because whoever, you're watching player A, but they're not playing you. They're playing player W or player
Right.
A.
Right.
And it's
Right.
very different because we all have our own strengths and weaknesses.
Right.
So yes, I watch their tendencies as much as I can. And
Right.
so of course that gets to the prep, the external prep as a
Right.
salesperson. Obviously, get the book on your target sales arena or your potential client as much as possible. But there's a mid zone too. Okay, so it's internal, how you perform the best and what you do to prep yourself. Find out as much tangible knowledge you can, just like the nuts and bolts about who you are going to be hitting up for the sale. But then there's some best practices you have to keep
Sure.
aware of that keep shifting. And that could be anything. I mean, what's wide open,
Right.
um, social media and all sorts of tools. But um, you have to know your own style. So
Right.
you have to be comfortable. Like, okay, you know what? You make people laugh pretty easily. So have a few good opener lines and closer lines, and
Right.
don't be afraid to use the humor. But God forbid you're not a funny person. Don't force that into your toolkit.
Right.
You
Right.
know, so
No.
that's part of the prep is knowing yourself.
Yeah. That's good. Very good point. No, I actually will teach people sometimes intentionally 40 ways to be interesting that have nothing to do with humor. Everybody sort of thinks that it's all about humor. It's not. It's about it being compelling and interesting. And as you just mentioned, thank you for saying it. Look, when it comes to you naturally, it's a nice tool to have in the toolkit. And when it doesn't, it can really take away from you. But there's so many other tools. I'm with you on that one. Uh,
Yeah.
you know, um, I just want to remind people Ping Pong Leadership 18 Principles to Succeed at Any Table in Business, Sports, and Life on Amazon, obviously. Yes, on Amazon.
Oh
Yeah,
yes.
good, good.
Yeah. Yeah.
How's it doing? The book.
Oh, it's doing well. Yeah. It's selling, and we're about to do an audiobook that's coming out
Hmm.
soon. And
Are you doing the audiobook yourself?
yes.
Good going. Okay. Some of the times the publishers try and talk the authors out of it. It's your voice we want to hear. And some people they'll go, I'm going to do my audiobooks. Like, are you doing it? I hope not. But no, you've obviously got some bounce in your voice.
I mean, I
So
shouldn't read the book myself. What are you
yeah,
talking about?
exactly. Exactly. Well, there's some very talented people. Okay. And we got some reviews up on that book.
Yeah, but I would love to get more.
Absolutely. Well, that's something I really preach to my audience, how important it is to not just get a book, but put a review up there. One, it's probably the nicest thing you can do for an author. And two, it'll help your own little Amazon presence the more engaged you are. So the algorithm likes that as well. All right. So we're going to get
And
that
it
book.
did
I'm going to
win.
remind you at the end of the podcast. And don't forget the reviews. All right.
Thank you.
All right.
It did get to the top of a couple categories too.
Did it? Well, I mean, who's battling you on ping pong? You're
Well,
number
no,
one
I
in ping
mean,
pong category. I'm
it
making
was,
fun of
yeah,
you.
yes, it was number one in ping pong for a little bit, but also strategic
There
communications
you go. Okay,
like that. Yeah,
good.
because
Good.
it is.
Take
I
that,
like to
Rob.
say
Yeah.
it's a business leadership book through the
Hmm.
lens of ping pong.
Right.
So your game will improve hopefully if you read the book, but you could skip ahead and only read the leadership sections and get
Well,
a lot out.
that's an interesting point you bring up because when I'm mentoring authors, one of the first assignments I give them is even before you write your manuscript, go to Barnes and Noble and find it. Find where that book would be. So your book, it's interesting. It can't, they don't want it in multiple areas. So I'm assuming I would not find it in the sports section. I'm
No,
finding it in the business leadership or leadership section,
yes,
which is where
absolutely.
it should be, by the way. But
Yeah.
that tells me all about the book that I need to know. We're just using ping pong as a way of explaining these
Yeah.
leadership principles. Okay, let's keep going. You write about misdirection and how it benefits both business leaders and athletes. Tell me more about that.
Pong principle number 3, when deception is fair play. That was a fun one. So what I do in the book is, again, it's two parts to each chapter in the
Mhm.
game and leadership. So table tennis by far is one of the most one of the games that relies a lot on deception. I mean, there's many. I mean, the quarterback sneak in football, it's in the phrase, the sneak, right?
Right.
And there's a lot of allowable deception. I'm not talking underhanded, illegal, immoral types of moves. I'm talking the no look pass in basketball is a gorgeous thing. Magic Johnson was like one of the originators of that, right? And we need it because if you don't keep certain elements off guard, usually your opponents, it's just not as easy to score the ball. So in table tennis, there's a lot of spin and you can disguise that. And I just talk about how there's all sorts of rules that are kind of drawing the line between, we don't want this in the game because it's not seen as sporting. Like, for example, and I'm holding the paddle up again, it's red rubber on one side, black on the other. That's not arbitrary. There's so many different types of rubber in the game that you want to know if your opponent is twiddling. Twiddling means quickly flipping the paddle in the middle of the rally because there's usually different rubber on your forehand and your backhand side. And in the old days, like in the 80s, there was not this rule. And so you could have black on both sides or red on both sides. And you really couldn't tell. And it was kind of like, okay, so in the middle of rally, all of a sudden the ball gets dead or it gets hyper spinnier. And it wasn't seen as sporting. And so they made a rule about that. But you can still so now it has to be red on one side, black on the other. But still, there's plenty of room for deception. Okay, so in leadership, I talked with Nolan Bushnell and I highlighted and he's the founder of Atari video games and also Chuck E. Cheese of all things.
Didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Fun fact for today. Okay, keep going.
He was into the robotics side of it. That's
Hmm.
why, right?
Mm.
But so I highlight one really inspiring leader in each chapter. Okay, so he has these great stories. When he was inventing Pong, the video game, right? So it's a natural dovetail here. And he was trying to roll it out in the 70s. He had a very small operation up in the Bay Area. And it was bootstrapped, and they were pumping out 1,000 game little consoles maybe a day or less, maybe 500. I don't remember the exact number. And once that demand hit, it was big, right? So they were pumping out as fast as they can, their little factory. And meanwhile, there's the big gaming industry, and there were like mobsters involved with the pinball games and the bars and the cigarettes and everything, and all sorts of other players. They would just come in, buy a unit, Pong unit, take it apart, reverse engineer the components, go to their own suppliers, and they had a lot more cash in those days. And they would just, okay, slap it together, sell knockoffs. And they were producing 5,000, 10,000 units a day and just dominating that market that he had created and he owned the IP to. And I asked him, well, okay, why not pursue legal avenues? Because, well, there wasn't enough time. We didn't have the money or the time or the inclination to just do that because this was like a week by week issue. We were hemorrhaging opportunity. So Nolan is a brilliant guy. And he said it was time for a little useful deception. So it was beautiful. What they did is they simply went to their manufacturer and they said, okay, the little semiconductor units, the little centipede units with the circuits on
Right.
the circuit board. They said, okay, label number 17, 31. Label number 4, 9. Label number 28, 53. And then just produce those for us. We assemble them at our little warehouse anyway, and we know we have the code, so we'll know, oh, 53 actually means 17. Okay. So then they put them together, boom, no problem. All the competitors bought up all the wrongly coded, labeled parts, put together a beautifully looking little console that did nothing. You press the button, black screen. And so they had warehouses full of unusable garbage merchandise. And that set them back by many, many months. And it was perfectly legal. I mean, you can do whatever you want with your labels. It's your machine, it's your supply chain. So Nolan didn't do anything wrong except for use that insidious force against the wrongdoers. And it was a beautiful act of deception. Oh. And he tried not to gloat too much when he saw some of these companies go bankrupt.
That's a wild story. I'm relating that to our audience, and I think that I'm thinking as a speaker. Well, you ever hear of a guy named from old time guy, but a guy named Paul Harvey?
Oh yeah,
yeah,
and that's
Paul Harvey. Good day. But the beauty of Paul Harvey was he would tell a story, and in a sense, you had no idea who he was talking about. He would describe a situation. I remember one of my favorites with John Wayne, skinny little guy doing this, doing that. It's like, who could he be talking about? Who? And at the very end, but you know him as, and so he's able to hold his audience because we don't know what the punchline is. We don't know where this is going. And the longer it takes, as long as you don't overstay your welcome, the more interesting it is, the more you hold on to it. I still remember the John Wayne one because I couldn't believe everything was leading up to one of the most powerful actors I'd ever seen, certainly as a kid, and how it was the opposite when he was a child. But that's the beauty of telling a good story, is not giving away the punchline or where you're going. Letting an audience just stay on this one more moment as a sales trainer. Frequently, if I walk in and go, be important, you might want to ask some questions and listen out there. People will yawn and go, oh, this guy again. But no, I use deception. I'll tell them, let's just look at your style. Let's sell something, But I'm not telling them I could care less about your style. I'm setting up monitors. I'm recording certain things. They know we're recording, but I'm letting them kind of walk in the wrong direction, explain the right direction, which they'll almost always agree to, and then have them examine the direction they just walked in. And you can't do it all the time, and you have to be careful, but I'm just playing it back, if I've got this right, to me and I love doing it, of kind of a misdirection move that we'll make. Or because many people are what we call unconsciously incompetent. Have you ever heard of the levels of conscious behavior? So many people don't know that they don't know. So you're not really doing them any favors going, do it this way. Here's the punchline, whatever. You're not talking to me, but okay. So sometimes you have to take people through that and help them become aware that they didn't know before we show them the right way.
Yeah. So are you saying that I should have Shouldn't have divulged the Chuck E. Cheese bit.
No, no, no. One of the things you do very well, and I'm trying to do it on this side, is you have made you are a master of two things, of ping pong and the ability to translate that into leadership. Me, I'm in the other corner going, all right, I'm going to translate that leadership and Pong into selling and presenting. And it's not a surprise to me. It's one of the reasons why I was really looking forward to talking to you. That of course they should intersect, not perfectly. I don't know if we'll hit all 18, but we don't write books for any reader to hit all. Metaphorically speaking, to hit all 18. Where your book is a vitamin to me. I'm going to take it, digest it, and my body or mind will take what's applicable. And so it's really, I'm enjoying the conversation because I'm applying it. We'll do one together. The next one will be, ping pong for salespeople. But you won't have to deviate very far. You'll just have to sort of change your position on the at the table, widen it out, however we were saying it, but just get a look at how it intersects with persuasion or influence. But they're business principles, and I'm not surprised. I'm just over here going, let me keep connecting, see if I can do it. It's interesting. All right, sure. You talk about the importance and pitfalls of data measurement, both game and ping pong, and in leadership. You're not losing me there, but connect. All right, you go first. Connect that data to leadership. I probably won't have to touch it, but let's just take a look at it.
Sure. Pong principle number 1, and I started that book.
Ooh.
I started the book off of that for a reason. Be careful what you measure and why. I talked to the Prime Minister of Iceland about this because she is all about looking at GDP as a really deficient way of measuring a country's progress and its economic status in the world. But it's an attractive number because all simple numbers, big numbers that purport to encompass a wide range of skills or elements or facets are attractive because they're easy and they're easy to compare and throw around, like the SAT and things like that, right? But in general, the concept is we have more data than ever at our fingertips right now in the history of humankind. Metrics, big data, right?
Right.
And it's cheap and it's accessible. But that just means there's more opportunities to mismeasure it, misinterpret it, and make bad decisions because you need that layer of human judgment. Even with AI, we still need that layer of human judgment. And so Seth Godin calls it speedometer confusion. And I reference that in the book. Your speedometer might say you're going 80 miles an hour. It's like, yeah, baby. You might just be going in circles really fast, right? So there's so many more things you have to look at in that one indicator. So she looked at GDP and it's like, nope, in Iceland, they have so many other ways and to appreciate their quality of life, their economic progress, political progress, social progress. They come up with a wellness index of 39 indicators. And they worked with New Zealand and Scotland and other countries to come up with this. And they surveyed the population, speaking of listening and sales, they surveyed the population to say, what is most important to you to signify that your life is progressing as you want it to? And they, like the top 3 were health and wellness, not just personally, but family and community health and wellness, environment and safety in your community and in your environment, and then ease and comfort in knowing there's a job for you and possibilities for you to have a strong career. And there's a whole bunch, but those were like among the top. And so then they came up with these 39 indicators, right? And that's how they measure their progress and the yardstick they use for economic, political, social success in their country. And it's just an example of how there's so many ways you can misapply numbers. And I have stories in the book about that. In table tennis, I talked to Stellan Bengtsson, who's a former world champion from Sweden, and I've trained with him, amazing guy. He says, data is useful, but it's always backward looking. So it's a snapshot, and some of the best players in the world, they play against the data. So all your strategic analysis is not going to do that much good when it's deuce and you need just, or you had 1 point, you need to fit its match point. There's no way he's going to be predictable right then. So it's like, oh yeah, 84% of the time, if I give him a deep backhand serve, he's going to chop it back to the middle. Okay. Well, knowing that, he knows that too. He's not going to give you that. And so the best players don't let you take advantage of your metrics because they play against them.
Right.
I mean, that's a blanket statement, of course. There are
No,
tendencies with
it
everybody.
makes sense though. It does. It makes sense. I mean, I'm thinking if you watch a football game, for instance, you'll see they'll intentionally create certain tendencies so that when in the fourth quarter, when they really need that 4th and 2 or whatever it is, wow, he went the complete opposite way. He ran it 6 times that way every time they showed this formation to set up that 7th time
Exactly.
when they really had to have it. So
Exactly.
I think we see it. I also, it was years ago, but I've always remembered this, and people quote me numbers. They'll go, yeah, 36% of the time we do this, 87. And somebody, it was a financial guy, whispered in my ear once. I think I was in my early 30s, and he said, every third number somebody tells you isn't true. And I went, what are you and I really, really look at that. It's an exact, they're not exact, they're just fudging it a little bit, but maybe it's an older number or whatever. But I don't question that anymore. I think pretty much every time somebody goes in, 27% of the time with them, all right, you're the second. That's my second number today. You're good. But whoever's coming next,
The
forget
next
it.
guy, come on. Yeah.
Next guy's in trouble. All right, we're coming down the home stretch. I've got some quirks, so my wife tells me. How do you best examine your personal quirks? And because we've all got them, but rather than avoid them, maybe use them for our success. I'd like to think my quirks are working for me, but I'm quirky. I admit it.
That's great. Well, and you come to terms with that.
Right. Own it.
You come to terms with Pong principle number 9, embrace your quirks.
Okay.
On the table tennis side, I grew up, like I said, from 6. We moved into a new house when I was 6. There was a grungy old table in the basement. I'd never seen a weird table like that with a stripe down the middle. And my parents like, oh, we'll show you all about that. And they were pretty good players. Anyway, but it was in the basement. There was a rec room. There was a piano on one side and bookshelves on the other. And then like an old appliance of some kind over here. And there was just a sewing table, I think, on the side. Anyway, bottom line is there was not a lot of room to move around. So I was not really able to expand my game, even as I got to be 9, 10, 11 years old and became a student of the game. I had to be a close to the table, pretty aggressive player. And I was also a really shrimpy kid, so I didn't have a long reach. And so that was just my game. And even when I learned classic technique later, which is much more wide ranging, if you have to go back 6 feet or more to get more power and time, I could do it, but I naturally felt comfortable forward. Now, that's not the ideal way to learn the game. And yet, as my coach taught me, okay, let's just take advantage of that. Most people don't expect you to go up so comfortably and stay up so comfortably because you take a lot of heat. You're losing precious microseconds by being that close. But I can take it much quicker off the bounce and I can cut down the angles. I'm less vulnerable to wide angles because I can cover them all being closer. And so I use that, and I still, of course, I go back when I need to, but that's part of my game. That's my quirk. My constricted background has become a strength in a way because it's a little more unpredictable. Okay. Going to the leadership side, Valerie Condos Field, who was voted the Pac-10 at the time, Pac-10 Coach of the Century in gymnastics for UCLA. She won 7 national championships in women's gymnastics. Pretty impressive, right? And amazing feats by her gymnasts. She had never competed a single day in her life in gymnastics. She had never, ever been a gymnast. She was a dancer. She was a ballerina. Mm. And she graduated secondary school and went to Washington, D.C. to work for the National Ballet. And then she saw this job listing as a gymnastics coach at UCLA, assistant coach. And she was always fascinated by it. And she figured there's a crossover between dance, ballerina, and gymnastics. Gets the job, and she's a good performer. And This team still sucks, kind of. They were just middling. And eventually she works her way up, gets the head coaching job. And she tries to be the head coach, authoritative and blah, blah, blah. And they were still flailing. And then she said, screw it. You know what? Let's just go with what I know. I'm a performer. I know how to smile. I know how to connect with judges. I know the importance of, as you walk into the auditorium, you are already connecting with the crowd. It's not just when you step on the balance beam. She imparted all these things to the women on the team. I mean, the importance of smiling and eye contact. And then they started winning. And 7 national championships later, she's kind of proved her point.
Right.
That her quirk and her huge feeling of inadequacy led her to try something a little different. And also listen to the girls and use a lot of positive feedback and biofeedback and feedback from their performances, because she had to rely on them. They knew more about gymnastics than she did in many cases.
Yeah. But they were learning something. They could have worked with 15 coaches up to then. They were learning something that they had from a completely different angle. I love that story. I think of, I'm not a great golfer, but I think of Jim Furyk, who has one of the loopiest, weirdest swings. I mean, he's on the senior circuit now, but I believe, I know he shot a 59. I think he shot a 58 one time. He may still hold the record of the lowest round ever. And I always looked at his swing and thought, but his dad was a coach and said, he kind of couldn't get that loop out of his swing, and then decided, no, that's his quirk. And I'll leave it with this. I remember I had, 20 years ago when we were, playing sort of the more primitive computer games. I remember I had a little Tiger Woods golf game, and Furyk was one of and true to form, his little computer guy was completely different than the other computer guys. It was all kind of loopy and strange. And, but I wish people, I'm walking away from that, hoping that people will kind of celebrate that uniqueness. It can become our calling card. And I'm always afraid that people avoid it. Even I've never met anybody who liked their own voice, for instance, but I've really grown to like my voice. And I know it's nasal, and I know it's a little hoarse, and I know but damn it, it's mine. And nobody can imitate it better than I can. And so I wish, I'm not trying to be something else. Embrace it. Have a little of the quirkiness. So I just think that's a great point to land on. And I appreciate you telling that. All right, how do the book is Ping Pong Leadership, 18 Principles to Succeed at Any Table in Business, Sport, and Life. The man, Justin Bookie, he's saying to you, don't just get the book. No, I'm actually saying, don't just get the book. Write a review. Really important. How do people get a hold of you?
Easiest way, just go to pingpongleadership.com. Plenty of information about the book and me, or follow me on LinkedIn, Justin Bookie.
Good. And it's Bookie, Bookey. So that domain was available, huh?
That was amazingly. Yeah. I couldn't get John Smith. So
well, good for you. Listen, I really appreciate the conversation. I love talking to you. And my only not concern, but I wish people could see him while he's speaking. And usually a podcast guest, it doesn't matter. But trust me, he's had that paddle in his hand a few times. He doesn't know it, but he sort of was getting a little bit lower in his stance while he was explaining things. So I think he was ready to play a couple points. But just grateful to have met you and really pleased. And anyway, thank you for coming on the show. I'm really grateful.
Oh, it's been fun, man. It's fun to bat ideas back and forth.
Bat that ball around. You bet. Well, we'll do it again as well as we can next time, everybody. Until then, stay safe.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please rate and recommend it on iTunes, Outcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get more information on this show and Rob at jollis.com.